So forgive the notes, please. I actually had about 6 pages prepared, but I knew that wouldn't fly since I'm second to last. So what has changed since we last met? The last ILEETA that I attended was in 2015. And what occurred in 2014? Anybody remember, right here in St. Louis? Michael Brown, the Ferguson case. And we have had breakneck change, I believe, in that time. Change unlike we've ever seen, I think, in the history of law enforcement. Technology changes things, but incidents change things also. I'm a little old school. You might be able to tell that. I got a few gray hairs, been in the business 30 years, but I've never seen this much change this rapidly. It bothers me that it seems like the bellwether moment for police reform in this country has been defined as post-Ferguson. And unfortunately, much of what was said early on about Ferguson turned out to be not true. We mostly agree on that, I would imagine. I'm not so old school that I don't believe in change. I agree that change was needed. I think what we've seen in the last 4 years, and I've seen many articles on it, is the depolicing of America. I think we've accepted it readily in this business, and we've allowed this to go on. And I think as trainers, we have a responsibility to change that, that trend. I'll give you a few examples. I know trainers, I know bosses, watch commanders, road sergeants who actively discourage their people from engaging in foot pursuits. I don't know about you guys, but 30 years ago, I got in this business for the police adventure. I wanted to chase bad guys. Wasn't built for it, okay? God didn't give me the body for it, but I usually got to be the second guy in the chase and help out. Foot pursuits are dangerous, obviously. They often result in a use of force at the end, or even a use of deadly force. But I believe that we can train our people to conduct them safely and be smart about them. Traffic stops are down. Anybody experiencing that in their? Or anybody see an activity go down in their agencies in the last few years? I've definitely seen it, and I've heard that complaint from many people. Traffic stops are down. Why? Because cops don't want to get out of the car anymore. They literally say, well, why bother? I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get indicted. I'm going to get disciplined. I'm going to get a complaint. I want to get promoted, and so I'm not going to do anything. Narcotics and prostitution. One of our local state attorney's offices down in Florida won't allow us to do a lot of the undercover narcotics and prostitution enforcement anymore because they would have a hard time. You know, when you're making drug deals and when you're making prostitution deals, you have to say some things. You have to act out in a role as if a prostitution customer or a drug dealer or a drug buyer would act. So they don't really want us to get up on the stand and talk about some of these things and have the tape recordings and things like that. Plainclothes traffic stops. You know, I've been a cop for 30 years. I've driven an unmarked car for most of my career with a Code 3 package. And every once in a while, when I see somebody driving recklessly, I like to flip on the blue lights and let them know that, hey, you know what? There's more of us out here than just the marked units, and that's a great deterrent for a lot of people. It's a great you can educate them a little bit. Anybody doing surround and flush? Search warrants. We don't hit them dynamically anymore, do we? We stand outside with a big truck and a bullhorn and say, "Come out, first flush your drugs, and then come on out." And maybe there'll be something left that we can arrest you for. And that's been a great frustration, being a former tactical and SWAT guy for 17 years. A lot of us won't even execute search warrants at night anymore, again, because of the danger, the possibility for a confrontation. Early morning raids, those are a thing of the past. And there's a lot of data to support that. But again, you know, if the job is so dangerous that we don't want to do it anymore, why do we do it? You know, and again, we as trainers, we can have an effect on that. Perhaps the best example I can give you is right after Ferguson, I was teaching a class in Polk County, Florida. Anybody familiar with the personnel down there? Polk County, Florida is the land of a very no-nonsense, tough, well-spoken sheriff who, when asked why his officers shot and killed a cop killer, they shot him 68 times. He said, "I assume that's all the bullets they had." It's a man after my own heart. I told you I was a little old school. So I'm teaching the class, and I put the question to the class: what's going on here? What's the mood? What's the feeling on the road? And a salty sergeant, about 8-year guy, high speeder. I could tell he was a high speeder. He raised his hand. He said, "Lieutenant, 2 words: firemen, cops." Not disparaging firemen, okay? If any of you are. He said, "Firemen, cops." And I said, "Explain that." I knew what he meant. He said, "They're sitting behind the Publix, a grocery store. They're getting the radio call. They're going to the call. And they're taking the information. They're going back behind Publix and they're writing. They're not stopping anybody. They're not doing anything anymore." You know, so the bottom line is, if they don't want to stop that drug dealer on the corner, that potential armed robber who's walking down the street kind of hiding his face, that burglar who's skulking through the neighborhoods, you know, there's no longer a penalty for being a miscreant standing on a street corner with a loaded .45 caliber in your waistband and, you know, 10 caps of heroin. And some of these crimes hold these neighborhoods that we serve, it holds them hostage, and it's a shame that we're not willing to do our jobs anymore, guys. And we gotta train them better. Perhaps the greatest, and why I'm looking at notes here, is because I wrote some notes and I changed my whole presentation last week after something happened in Palm Beach County. A young officer was working a plainclothes detail. He stopped off for what he thought was a motorist assist, a stranded motorist, and he found out it was occupied. It was occupied by by all accounts, a very decent young man. And he went to get out of the car, and because of the way he pulled up, he used horrendous tactics and horrendous procedures, okay? But I don't believe this kid needs to go to prison. As the homicide commander of our sheriff's office, I led the investigation, and I did not believe that there was probable cause for his arrest. He got out. He says he identified himself. The kid in the car had a gun, lawfully carried. He pulled the gun. He pointed at the officer. The officer did what I think most of us would probably do in that instance. The officer drew, shot 3 times, shot and killed the kid. That officer last week was convicted of manslaughter by culpable negligence because he should have foreseen, according to the state attorney's office, that his tactics were so egregious that he should have seen that they would cause a deadly force confrontation. I don't know how many of us could foresee that. I don't have a crystal ball. They don't issue those when you graduate the academy. And also attempted first-degree murder. The kid's going to do 25 minimum and possibly life in prison. So after that, a lot of my buddies are saying, you know, they're talking to me about the case because they knew I had a lot of knowledge about it. And they said, you know, Pete, why stop anymore? Why even stop for a motorist? Why not just drive by? Why not just put the blinders on? And I said, well, how about if your 16-year-old daughter's sitting in that car at 3:15 in the morning? Would you want somebody to stop? Would you want a law enforcement officer to stop? I think the answer is yes. You want somebody to stop by and ensure her safety while she waits for the tow. You know what? Just to give her a friendly face to talk to. I don't think we can give in to that kind of thinking, guys. As trainers, I don't think we're allowed to do that. I think there's a whole segment of society that's counting on the depolicing of America, okay? And I'm not saying we should go back to the old school tactics, okay? 1989 is when I started, and there was a lot of things that I saw in 1989 that I thought, whoo, this is pretty screwed up. We got to change this. And I'm happy that we have changed many of these things. My daughter my daughter starts the academy on May 13th. And sorry, when I talk about family, I get emotional. So what do I tell her? Do I tell her, hey, honey, you see that car at 3:15 in the morning? Drive right on by. Because as a parent, I think what? That's safer. That's the safest way for you to do your 25 and get out and join that check of the month club. But her dad was not that kind of cop. Her dad never avoided a fight, never passed up on a stop. And I know that's the kind of cop she wants to be. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is train her well, okay? Train her so that she knows, and everybody else that graduates that academy with her and comes up through this system, to make sure that they are confident and competent and professional, and they know how to do their job. We as trainers, we need to use our abilities to teach people that we can do it more safely. We can do it more professionally. We have a pipeline. Many times often we have a pipeline to the sheriff or the chief, and if we can assure them, hey, you know what, we shouldn't be discouraging this type of behavior. We should be getting back to the business of police work, okay? And I think that's what we've lost in a lot of ways. Robert Kennedy said, he had a quote, he said, every society gets a kind of criminal that it deserves. And every society gets the kind of policing that it insists on. And I hope he was wrong. I really believe that trainers are leaders. If you believe what is being taught at this conference, trainers are leaders and leaders are trainers. And we have a chance to change the direction of the way we're going. I think the way we're going is dangerous. I really believe that. I believe the depolicing of America is truly a dangerous thing. It makes it a more dangerous environment, and I believe that's evidenced by the fact that there's many more ambush attacks on police officers, and the statistics have borne that out. And why? Because there's a lawless atmosphere out there, guys. I really believe that. So anyway, train them well, and let's get back to police work.